Hello, everyone, and welcome to the With Chinese Characteristics podcast. I'm Natalie.
I'm Cherry.
Together we talk about topics with Chinese characteristics, trying to be a little bit louder during the intro because every time I do the audio balance, I realize that we started like an ASMR, like, hey, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the With Chinese Characteristics podcast.
This is Natalie, and this is Cherry.
Natalie and Cherry. Cherry is from China. I'm from America. We've got slightly different perspectives, but not too different.
Depends on the topic.
Depends on the topic. But what's our topic for today, Cherry?
Our topic today is a kidnap in London of Sun Yat-Sen. Of Dr. Sun Yat-Sen, I'm sorry.
Dr. Sun Yat-Sen, Cherry. He didn't spend 5 years in medical school for you to call him Mr. Sun Yat-Sen.
How disrespectful of me. And yes, that being a doctor is his biggest achievement that we should definitely honor.
Is there anything else he did, Cherry, that we should know about?
Can't think of anything
besides being a doctor?
Can't think of anything.
Oh, okay.
Don't know why we're talking about the kidnapping of a doctor
Well,
a century ago.
Doctors are important.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially during a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Hats off to them.
Hats off.
So no, Sun Yat-Sen is not just a doctor. He is a political leader, a Chinese statesman who is often referred to as the father of modern China.
By both sides.
By both sides. Exactly.
By the communists and the nationalists.
What did you say? A few things that they agree with.
Yes, right?
There's not that many.
Not that many. Well, do you know what it's sort of like? It's like Christians and Muslims and Jewish people. You know, they're the Abrahamic religions, right?
Okay.
Sun Yat-Sen is like Abraham, right? He's the kind of the person through which both sides is their kind of mythical founder.
Yes.
Not that mythical, though, because it only happened 100 years ago.
So he was born in 1866, passed away in 1925.
Mm-hmm.
The Republic of China, Taiwan, calls him the founding father officially. The People's Republic of China, we call him the great pioneer of modern Chinese democratic revolution. But unofficially, he's referred to as the founding father in mainland a lot of times too.
Not Mao.
Without Mao, there will be no new China.
I know.
But I think the point is
well, there'd be no new China.
No, exactly.
There'd still be a new China.
There was a China before 1949.
Yeah.
And that
was the original new China.
Even my government acknowledged that. China just didn't jump out of a rock like the Monkey King did.
So, but prior to Sun Yat-Sen, who I think is not that well known in the West, even though, I mean, he's more important to China than I think like George Washington is to the United States, because George Washington was a general, he was a president, but like he didn't decide what was going to be in the Constitution, right? He didn't.
I guess a group of them did.
Right, and he didn't come up with it wasn't his life goal to form a revolution. It was more like the revolution started, and he's like, let me get in on this. Like, this seems like pretty cool.
I get to pay less taxes?
Yeah, I get to pay less taxes. I get to be like the British Army always treated me like crap. Yeah. So I get to be like a colonel and general in charge. Anyway. But
would Americans be unhappy if you're talking about George Washington this way?
George Washington?
I don't know. Okay, even in China, George Washington is like this kind of mystical figure. Like he never told a lie.
I know. Okay,
and the thing about the apple tree.
I know that's all lies. That's just what we.
The apple. Did that happen?
Yeah, that's what we tell American school children because we felt like in the people when America founded thought if we don't have some national symbols, it's gonna fall apart. So we got to make George Washington into like Jesus.
Well, the story's made its way to China. I can tell you that.
Well, he should be happy about it. He was a cool guy besides having slaves, but he's not perfect. So, but anyway,
Mao was
true. That's true. I mean,
nothing wrong.
He could swim across the Yellow River, Cherry, when he's like 70. Right?
In cold winter weather. Yeah.
So he clearly did that, Cherry. That could not have been made up. But Sun Yat-Sen, so before Sun Yat-Sen, you have Imperial China. After that, after Sun Yat-Sen, it's not an argument over what the next imperial dynasty is going to be.
Yes.
It's over. Sun Yat-Sen kind of breaks the mold. And after Sun Yat-Sen, anybody making China anything but some sort of a republic, whether it's the People's Republic or the Republic of China. Yeah. Anybody outside of that mold seems absurd.
Yes.
Which we might get into on our next podcast.
There was a little blip
there. Which
of setback.
Yeah, a little setback. Anyway.
So subscribe.
Yeah.
And tune in for the next we don't know when it's coming, but it's sometime soon.
We're going to talk about Ren Shikai. Anyway, so more about Sun Yat-sen.
So he, like you said, he overthrew the Qing dynasty, the last imperial dynasty in Chinese history, and he served as the first president when the Republic of China was founded in 1912. Mm-hmm. Big figure in modern Chinese history. So whenever you see him in photos, he always looked very serious and put together. Got a little suit on, he's got a little mustache, very clean trimmed, and, a very respectful statesman. But that's us, people in the future, seeing him through the lens of history, knowing all his achievements now.
Yeah.
But back in the days, before he was the first president of China, before he was the founding father of the nation, he was really seen in the eyes of China, by that I mean Qing dynasty at the time, as this very dangerous rebel.
Enemy number one,
and sort of this thug, right?
Or terrorist even, probably.
Well, if you are a Qing dynasty, he is, right? Just like the American founding fathers were to the British
Army. Well, I mean, I would say it's interesting because they never had to experience, it was sort of a very, I mean, obviously a lot of people died and people stuff, but in a way it was sort of a cushy rebellion because it's like these...
What was the American
Revolution? Because... Okay. It's not like the Continental Congress is like hiding in caves, right? Like, they have a government, they form an army, it fights the British.
Right.
Occasionally they have setbacks, but it's not like they're living in the mountains. Sun Yat-sen had his work cut out for him because the Qing dynasty is not going to take any nonsense from him.
Only if the nonsense comes from the British government, which we will get to in a second. But for a good portion of his life, he was displaced and basically had to run around the world from continent to continent. He was everywhere. And he, in order to A, escape persecution, B, to fundraising, to try to convince more people to join him to keep the fire of the revolution burning. During this time, he had quite a few close calls that probably would have changed history.
Okay.
And we are going to talk about one of them today, which was, not to give the ending away, Kidnapped in London. But before that, let me give you a little brief, background about his life leading up to the point of the kidnap. Why does someone want to kidnap him? Mm-hmm. So in 1866, Sun Yat-sen was born in Guangzhou province in China into a pretty poor family. And
poorer than Mao's, I think.
Yeah, Mao came from a little bourgeoisie.
Mao was like a little country rich kid.
Yeah. Sun Yat-sen's father was a shoe shop apprentice. He was one child of 6.
That's a lot of children for not even a full shoe shop worker. No. Shoe shop apprentice.
Yeah, didn't own any shoe shops.
Yeah.
His brother, 12 years older than him, went to Hawaii and made a pretty good living on himself. At one point owned a farm of 100 people. Self-made man. And thanks to him, who had sponsored, lots of Sun Yat-sen's education.
Yeah.
Lots of his revolutionary costs and fundraising efforts. Bought a lot of national debt of New China.
Yeah.
So he went to Hawaii to meet his brother at the age of 13 and had English education at a religious school. Okay. And then he came back to China and enrolled in the College of Medicine in Hong Kong to study Western medicine. He later said that one of the reasons he chose that school in particular was because the environment in Hong Kong was much more open than mainland China. Timely, in 2021...
Can you imagine, Cherry, a Hong Kong where you can... be political and talk about ideas and not be worried about censorship?
No, I cannot at all.
I cannot imagine that.
Nope.
It's depressing.
God, yeah. How timely is this podcast? Only if this happened 2 years ago.
I just feel really bad if anybody's listening from Hong Kong because that is more open for Sun Yat-sen in the 1890s.
Yes. Well, I would argue today Hong Kong is still slightly more open than mainland China. That gap is closing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. He could freely express his early revolutionary ideas. So during those 5 years he was in school, famously, along with 3 of his classmates, they were nicknamed 4 Big Bandits, 四大寇, because they often got together and discussed politics and exchanged radical ideas. Allegedly, other students would avoid them at times and, in hallways due to how radical they were and didn't want to associate with them.
He was a bad dude, Jay.
I know, right?
He's like, yeah, tell the Qing government. I don't give a damn, right?
He wasn't arrested or anything, like it was all fun and jokes at this point. In 1892, he at the age of 26, he graduated top of his class. Their teacher did some networking and wanted to recommend him and this other top student from their class and get a meeting with Li Hongzhang, the famous Chinese politician, general, diplomat, you name it.
Basically kind of almost running China's foreign policy at this point.
Yeah. I think they wanted them to meet him. This is the future of China, these young doctors, maybe get a job somewhere. So they went to the local provincial government of Guangzhou and registered their information. The government was apparently very difficult to deal with, and they asked these students to report family history up to 3 generations back.
Okay.
Which I know sounds like a weird thing, but it still happens in China. Like if you look for a job in China, or like when you're registering your ID, right? You're asked to answer where your grandfather's hometown was. To be fair, though, a lot of times they don't check anymore because, it's impossible to check.
But just the fact that they still even ask it is stupid. Same thing with the Qing dynasty. They're just looking in the other direction.
Yes.
They want to make sure you're not a peasant, probably.
Exactly. But he was.
He wasn't a peasant. He was a townsperson.
Okay, he was a townsperson.
That's slightly different.
I mean, he grew up in a village. No,
but peasant doesn't just mean you're poor. It means you're like tied to the land.
He wasn't tied to the land. But he didn't have any direct relatives. He was in court who was ever a government official in his lifetime. Mm-hmm. So he was like, I've had enough. I'm not going to fill this out. I don't care about this meeting. So the meeting didn't happen. Then he left. Then he found a job in a hospital in Macau next to Hong Kong. And interestingly, so apparently he got into trouble because the Portuguese didn't want a Chinese doctor practicing in Macau. It was 1892, right? And Macau had been a colony for like a good 200-300 years at this point, I think.
And the British had only been there like
50 years
50
prior.
years or so. Yeah, and I mean that's the thing I think people don't think about sometimes with imperialism or just colonialism or these things is that the British were kind of almost like the last wave, right? And the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, I mean they had stuff, since like
they were the
1600s.
Pioneers of colonization.
Yeah, well, it wasn't quite the same because they're more like trading posts, I think, than especially in Asia than like the British would just invade places. But
Dr Sun Yat-Sen at the time, because apparently in order to practice medicine in Macau, a place very far away from Portugal, one has to be a doctor with a Portuguese license or educated from a Portuguese medical school.
So he got there and they're like, well, A, you're Chinese, B, we don't trust this British medical thing.
Yes.
They probably would not have done that if he was like a white
No, it was
British
because
doctor.
he was Chinese, yeah. That didn't work out for him. He went back to Guangzhou, mainland China, next to Hong Kong, and opened his own medical practice.
Okay.
So then he did that for a while, but his heart wasn't really in practicing medicine. His heart was in saving China.
He's a rebel.
Yeah. So in 1894, he decided to lobby Li Hongzhang, the guy he refused, I guess, a meeting with. Not that he got the meeting to begin with.
When you say lobby, I mean, how would he even get into Li Hongzhang's office, right? Like,
well, he had a plan. He did some networking.
Okay.
He even traveled up north. In his mind, maybe he was just like, I have all these ideas.
He's like, I'm so goddamn smart. If only Li Hongzhang's people would just listen to me, I could solve all this stuff.
Exactly, right? So he carefully wrote a proposal to put forward his own views on how the Qing government should deal with the challenges it's facing at the moment. And, it's
Here's what some random guy who just like runs a medical office.
Yeah. I can tell you how to rebuild
China's
glory.
Yeah, the most powerful person in China.
Yes. I mean, you can probably guess.
He probably just got ignored.
He did not get to meet Li Hongzhang.
Okay.
Li Hongzhang did not receive his proposal. He later published the article in newspapers, and that was that. But that was his first sort of real attempt to do something for China.
So he got pissed off, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to post it in the newspaper.
Well,
Li Hongzhang might have read that newspaper. We don't know if he did.
We don't know if he did, right? He could have, yeah. The message could have arrived at the court.
Yeah.
He went to Hawaii later that year.
Okay.
After
Running low on cash, I'm guessing.
raised some money
Yeah, okay.
and founded
Hey, brother.
founded only if I have like a ding 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 founded ding 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 the Revived China Society
Okay.
called Xinzhonghui for the goal of establishing prosperity of China and as a platform for future revolutionary activities.
So
he's official now. He's got a society.
And by the Qing Empire's perception, it's like he just founded Al Qaeda.
Well, they don't know him yet.
Okay, but
It wasn't under the radar just yet.
okay.
Yeah, but let's not compare Chinese
I'm
revolutionaries
saying from
to
their
Al-Qaeda.
view.
I know, but you know,
From the view of the
yeah.
Qing Empire, he's like, well, he's not yet. Now he's just some guy who didn't get a meeting.
China at this time, 1894, the first Sino-Japanese War was happening. Qing dynasty wasn't looking so great.
It's not like he was the only one, right? I think lots of people abroad.
That's why he was able to raise a society.
Yeah, but I mean, his wasn't the only society, right? Everybody had ideas about what to do with China. Everybody realized this isn't working out.
Lots of people, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, during the first Sino-Japanese War, after a string of Chinese military defeats, exposed corruption and incompetence within the imperial government, as if we didn't know that before. We needed,
Right.
needed the war to
I
tell us that.
I feel like a stiff breeze would expose corruption in the imperial government. Well, I think the Sino-Japanese War was really embarrassing for China because, I mean, Japan is this little tiny island. I mean, it's not that tiny, but I mean, it's this little island. China had been open to the West and theoretically been modernizing, quote unquote, for decades longer. It had way more money.
Yeah.
And
All the silver made from trade.
And Japan just crapped all over them. And
That's very well said. Crapped all over them.
Yeah.
Well, so in Sun Yat-sen's own words, China at the time, an unjust autocracy which thrives by its own rottenness.
Strong words.
The masses of China, although kept officially in ignorance of what's going on in the world and around them, this is where I give him credit. He says, are anything but a stupid people. Books on politics are not allowed. Daily newspapers are prohibited in China. The world around its people and politics are shut out. Reminds me of, well, I guess today it's not shut out, it's filtered out.
Yeah.
While no one below the grade of a mandarin of the 7th rank is allowed to read Chinese geography, far less foreign, the laws of the present-day dynasties are not for public reading. They are known only to the highest officials. The reading of books on military subjects is, in common with that of other prohibited matter, not only forbidden, but even punishable by death. No one is allowed, on pain of death, to invent anything new or to make known any new discovery. In this way are the people kept in the darkness, while the government doles out to them what scraps of information it finds will suit its own ends. Reminds you of some modern day...
Yeah, that's not strictly true, but I mean, I get his...
What's not strictly true?
I mean, it's not like it's forbidden to invent new things in China.
I mean, of course, he was speaking
yeah, I know. There's some hyperbole.
Yeah.
But I get his
It's not encouraged.
Yes, no.
Of course, you can invent something in your garage. Well, we didn't have garages back in your backyard, whatever.
Yeah.
In your basement, right? But like, there will be no state-sponsored research projects. There will be no schools to get people educated. There will be no funding. You know, you get it. Okay.
I get it.
Cool. And he said, to keep the masses in ignorance is the constant endeavor of Chinese rule.
Damn,
Sounds
Sun
kind of
Yat-sen.
familiar.
Sun Yat-sen would probably still be a rebel today.
Right? Anyhow, back to Sun Yat-sen's time. He didn't like where China was going, so he started this Revived China Society.
Yeah.
And
well, okay. I mean, he didn't like where China was, not where it was going, right? I mean, he didn't like it at any point.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly, yeah. Well, the Revived China Society went through several political reorganizations throughout the years and eventually became the party known to us as the KMT, the Kuomintang. So,
founded in Hawaii.
The Revived China Society, yeah.
Yeah, so Kuomintang.
Could say that, yeah.
Founded in Hawaii.
So, in the spring of 1895, the Revived China Society planned the first Guangzhou uprising.
Okay.
I think we've talked about Guangzhou uprisings in our episodes a few times, and there's many Guangzhou uprisings. Guangzhou as a port city in next to Hong Kong. In southern China, it's a place where actions happen, I guess.
Yeah.
So this was the first one, well-known one, the first Guangzhou uprising, and At this time, for this uprising, this guy called Lu Haodong was tasked with designing the revolutionary blue sky with a white sun flag. So you've seen this flag before. It flies today in Taiwan and in one museum in Nanjing, China.
It's
that's the Republic of China's flag. Yeah.
Famously on any Chinese war movie about the KMT, you'll see it on their caps. They always have the blue blue field with the
So this is where the flag came from. 1895, baby. So the plan of this uprising was to capture Guangzhou in one strike.
Okay.
And they had planned for 3 different armies. Although I don't know if you call them armies, really it's like a few hundred people each. These 3 routes of people were supposed to march into Guangzhou at the same time from different directions.
Okay.
However, one of them had to delay for 2 days, and then they heard the news that they're like, okay, we can't wait for 2 days. This is not going to happen now. We got to cancel and reschedule it, right?
Okay.
These things are sort of chaotic. It was back in the days. You can't just send a text message, say, don't come.
Yeah.
Hold off. So it was kind of too late when they realized that this is not going to happen, when they wanted to cancel the other 2 routes of people. And then details of the plans were leaked to the Qing government as well. And they were transporting all these firearms and stuff. So it was pretty easy to figure out what they were doing once they got ratted out. So the government began to arrest these revolutionaries, including Lu Haodong and several other leaders. Once they were captured, they were later executed.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're going to... The Qing government, not very
messing
lenient
around
to anyone,
No. And so, therefore, the first Guangzhou uprising was a failure. It really sounds like the attempt of the uprising, but we'll call it that. So under the pressure of the Qing government, the government of Hong Kong banned Sun Yat-sen from its territory for 5 years. He already had escaped, otherwise he would probably be executed too. We wouldn't have these good stories later. So he went into exile, and he was promoting Chinese revolutionary ideas and raising funds all over the world. He went to Japan first, at which place and time he cut off his queue. So he no longer has a queue now for both changing his appearance and for stating his determination in a new China.
Interesting he didn't cut it off before the Guangzhou uprising.
Well, I guess he had to blend in, you know.
That's true, I guess. Maybe...
Anyone who's cutting it off would be, that would be treason. It would be. So from Japan, he went around to America, to United States, and then Britain. And it is in Britain where our main story happens. And he's only 29 at this point. So in 1896, he went to London. And through his years in college, he's made some good friends, British friends. And one of whom was his teacher, Mr. James Kentley. So I think he was a doctor, but Sun Yat-sen himself called him Mr. James Kentley. Okay. So I'm going to honor that. So he stayed at the hotel nearby Kentley's house. He was taking his time to enjoy London and go to the museum and
see all the Chinese history that was stolen and put in.
Was it stolen at that point? Some of them probably already got over there. Got transported. So
Summer Palace had been burned at this point.
Yes, right? So even though he was one of the top political criminals abroad with a price on his head, but he just went out and about in London. He just under broad sunlight. Yeah. And apparently he knew that there was a Chinese legation nearby, but he didn't know the exact location. It's not like they published the address, I guess, in newspapers. There's no Google Maps back in the days. It's
just kind of funny though, because I'm just imagining being a revolutionary against a country. Yeah. Then you're in London and just having no idea where their legation is.
No.
I would think that would probably be the first thing I would find out.
I mean, it's not like you're in Hawaii or some small town elsewhere. You're in London. There is a Chinese legation in London.
I'm sure you could ask someone. Somebody could tell you.
He knew that was on some street, but he didn't know where it was. So he apparently passed by the Chinese legation multiple times, just casually, and boy, did they notice. He didn't notice, but they did. They also actually got tips from the Chinese diplomats in America that Sun Yat-sen had boarded a ship to England. So they knew that he was coming.
So he's important enough now that they're tracking him.
They are tracking him, yeah. So they realized that he's just right there. Yeah. You know? Sun Yat-sen and his friends actually also joked about it. Mr. James Kentley and his wife was joking, oh, don't go nearby the Chinese embassy. And he's just where is the Chinese embassy? I have no idea. So
okay, a little bit carefree.
I think they were thinking that he's in England, right? You know what I mean? It's a different country.
Haven't they seen Wolf Warrior? Anybody who insults China will be punished.
Yes.
Anywhere they are in the world, Jerry.
No matter how far away.
Yeah.
So one Sunday morning, October 11th, 1896, Sun Yat-sen was on his way to church Religion played a pretty big part in his life, I think, especially his early life. But on his way to church to meet his friend, a Chinese man approached him and started making small talk, which should have been his first sign, because we don't make small talk. But, they started making small talk and asked if he was Japanese or Chinese, when they clearly knew who he was. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, Sun Yat-Sen apparently was used to foreigners thinking of him as Japanese on first impressions.
Because he didn't have a queue.
He didn't have a queue, but he always dressed in little suits and his mustache just looked very Japanese.
He's the first. He's like the earliest kind of Chinese statesperson or politician or historical figure I can think of that you see in Western clothes.
Cool. Yeah. Good
right.
Point.
I mean, you see, even up until 1900, you see, Chinese officials in robes and crap, and and Sun Yat-Sen.
He was not wearing
Sun
robes.
Yat-Sen, right. And I think that it does require a certain amount of bravado, even abroad, to be a Chinese person
and dressed that way.
Yeah, not having the queue and dressing that way, because it does mark you.
So they asked if he was Japanese or Chinese, and to which he answered Chinese, and he's Guangzhou, and the guy was like, "Oh wow, me too. We're home. We're homemates."
Yeah.
And as they were talking, another Chinese man appeared, and they basically, two of them sort of walked him off the sidewalk into a building.
Okay.
As they were talking, and upon entrance, Sun Yat-Sen immediately realized that this is the Chinese legation everyone's been talking about. They've got him.
Okay. They didn't he hasn't really been kidnapped, Jerry. He kind of walked into
That was the argument.
Okay.
On the Chinese part, actually, they said he walked into it.
Okay.
In his own recount,
yes.
It's not like they tied him up and lifted him in there.
Yeah.
He really didn't know what it was.
Did he write about it then?
He did. Lots of information today came from a book that's called Kidnapping London, written by no other than Sun Yat-Sen himself in English.
Probably to raise money.
Yeah, no, it really helped him out.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that. But I would recommend the book. Upon his arrival, the door closed on him, by the way.
Okay.
After he went in. It's not like he could just walk, turn around and walk out.
Yeah.
Upon his arrival, he was questioned for his name. Obviously, they know who he was, and where he was staying, so that they could supposedly get his luggage for him by not a Chinese official, but a British gentleman, Sir Halliday Macartney.
Okay.
A diplomat serving the Chinese government during the late Qing dynasty.
So he wasn't British Chinese, British guy.
Yeah.
Who was an employee of the Qing government.
Right? So I was like, that's odd, but actually that was pretty common.
Well, I know the guy in charge, I think his name was Hart. He's Gregory Hart or something. Mm-hmm. The guy in charge of the entire Qing customs system, essentially the tax system, right?
Yeah.
Of foreign imports and export.
Yeah.
Was a British guy.
Yeah.
And instead of, this is what Sun Yat-Sen was complaining about, but it's instead of modernizing, right? It's they're just bringing in a contractor, right? They're bringing in a consultant, right? Where it's well, we don't want to teach a Chinese person how to do this, right? That's kind of dangerous. We might not be able to trust them if they get too much power.
Well, I also say though, so all these British officials that were working in the Chinese courts have deep ties to the British government.
Yes.
It would be very hard to make China into an official colony, right? It's too big of a place. I think the Japanese had proved that later during World War II. But also it's sort of let's just guide China.
Let's guide China's money into our bank accounts.
Exactly. So Macartney is one of those people. He was actually a relative to George Macartney, the 18th century British ambassador to China, who was pretty famous for that. So Macartney went to China and joined the effort to suppress the Taiping Rebellion. And he decided to make his home in China, and he married the niece of Li Hongzhang.
Oh, wow.
So he's part of the family now, and he became a civil servant of the Chinese imperial government, first in China and then in England. He lived in Nanjing until 1876, apparently, and left for London, served as counselor to the Chinese legation for the remaining 30 years of his life. So when Sun Yat-Sen is meeting him...
So Sun Yat-Sen thought he was going to get any sympathy from a British guy. He was mistaken.
He was mistaken, right? So he wasn't the ambassador himself. He was the counselor to the Chinese legation. However, as told to Sun Yat-Sen by the Chinese officials who talked to him during his capture, Macartney was really the one in charge. Sun Yat-Sen had asked for Chinese ink and paper so he could write to the Chinese minister and asking for mercy.
Because he probably thought, I'm dead. They're just going to kill me in the backyard.
That's what he was thinking. Yeah. But they didn't. They kept him in a bedroom. They kept the door locked, but they didn't torture him or anything. To their credit. Probably didn't want to do it on British soil.
Yeah.
But when he asked for to write a Chinese letter to the Chinese minister, the servant said, English is best. For the minister is but a figurehead. Everything is in Macartney's hands, and you had better write to him. So that sort of shows you the political climate within the Chinese legation.
No, I wonder if that's partially because one of the things that I think probably Sun Yat-sen was trying to get at in order to get support was not only that the Qing court was corrupt, that it was under the thrall of the British.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of countries thought that the British had way too much power already, right? And they didn't want them taking over another.
No, he was talking to a broader audience, perhaps. So during his capture, he was
during his vacation.
Yeah, he tried many different methods to get words out to his friends.
Okay.
Right, supposedly his friends like a street over, like London's not that big of a place. He was on his way to church, you know what I mean? And this is just a house on the street.
Yeah. If you're a political dissident, don't talk to strangers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, especially strangers from your own country who are forcing you into a house. So he wrote notes for the Chinese diplomats to pass on. They agreed and never delivered any of the notes. He tried to write notes on little scraps of paper and wrinkle them into paper balls and throw them onto the street through the window. The window in his room, however, wasn't facing the street. And the paper balls can't go far because they're so light. So then he tried
So somebody every morning is sweeping up the courtyard.
Yeah.
They're sweeping up all of Sun Yat-sen's little messages.
I know it looks like I'm really going into details, but you know what? In his book, he really went into details about all these little ways that he tried to like get words out, and I just find it fascinating. Because it was so light, he tried to wrap little coins he had with him in the paper.
He probably only had so many coins with him, though.
Yeah, no, exactly, right?
And he's still not facing the street.
Still not facing the street, no. And the guards would just go out and like pick the paper balls back. So they found out he was doing it. They collected the paper balls, right?
Yeah.
And then
they probably got his money too.
They locked the window.
Oh, okay.
Of course, they didn't return the coin. They're like, would you like this back?
Yeah, they're like, sweet.
Yeah. So he was kept in the Chinese legation for a good few days.
Okay, so he's not, despite the fact that he did this revolution, and he is essentially like an international fugitive, he is not really cut out for this life. He's not some sort of hardened revolutionary.
No, he doesn't know how to fight. You know, he doesn't have martial arts.
And his grand plan is crumpling up some paper and throwing it out the window.
And he said he couldn't sleep, and like he didn't take off his clothes.
Well, I mean, I'm sure he's nervous, right? I mean,
yeah, he's a doctor. He's even though he grew up sort of first few years of his life when he was poor, but
he's no James Bond, right?
He's no James Bond. He's a good statesman though. He's very good at making speeches, not very good at like escaping houses. Yeah. So he was kept there for a good few days, and he was trying to convince the Chinese diplomats that whatever they are planning would be a risky proceeding. Since they're not conducting this business in accordance with the law. This was not a legal extradition, it's a kidnapping, he declares. But this was his words of reason. He was trying to reason with the people who had kidnapped him, that this is illegal, what they're doing. Clearly it is. Yes. They know that. Why else would they? Yeah. However, the Chinese boasted that they had connections with a steamboat company that they could trust. Therefore, they could secretly just ship him out, and they were planning on declaring him as a mentally unstable person.
That's still a tactic that's used in China today.
I know.
My son has an internet addiction.
Mm-hmm. However, the problem is Sun's departure would not take place in the same week he was kidnapped because the minister was unwilling to go to the expense of exclusively chartering the whole steamer. So they had to wait for some cargoes to go with Sun Yat-sen, so that they only had to pay for the passenger ticket.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine the top feature? And they executed everyone, like they executed other people they had captured. Yeah. So clearly they were going to execute him.
Yeah. They just wanted to, they might have done it even as soon as they got on the boat. They just didn't want to do it on English soil. But
they were like, you know what? It's too expensive. Let's just wait for a few days. Yeah. Let's also take some tea back. I don't know. Whatever they were transporting back to China. So we have a budget,
Yeah, we had a budget
for this anti-terrorist
They're like,
campaign.
if we move up the schedule and leave tomorrow, I mean, it's gonna be 10% extra. They're like, okay, we'll wait.
Right.
I mean, and this is the guy who did eventually overthrow the Qing. So
Yeah. And also apparently someone like the one Chinese diplomat when he was captured said this is by the order of the emperor who wants you captured at any price, alive or dead.
Well,
I
not any price.
Not at exactly.
He wants you alive or dead, but we got to get a good deal on the tickets.
Right. Or maybe the minister thought he got to get it and he can keep the rest of the budget.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I just find that so comical and like unbelievable. This is the top fugitive of the country.
Yeah.
So they're like, let's get a deal on this ticket. So anyways, Sun Yat-sen thought this was it for him. He was like, all hope was lost. But he decided to make a determined advance to call an English servant at the Chinese legation.
Okay.
Told the servant that he was a political refugee from China.
Which is true.
Which he is, right? He was. And because the English servant didn't know who he was. He just knew they captured a Chinese person.
Yeah.
Sun Yat-sen wasn't that famous abroad just yet, but wait until after this event is over.
Well, we used to joke that, or we've joked before that, like, if Mao was in jail, he could talk his way out to the guard. But,
Yeah.
But I mean, Sun Yat-sen, I mean, that's what he's doing, I guess.
Well, this is how he did it.
Yeah.
He explained that just as the Sultan of Turkey wished to kill all the Christians of Armenia, so the Emperor of China wished to kill me because I was Christian and one of a party that was striving to secure a good government for China. All English people sympathize with the Armenians, and I do not doubt they would have the same feeling towards me if they knew my condition.
That's funny, though, because, I mean, the Turkish government to this day denies there was an Armenian genocide. And Sun Yat-sen is just like...
Sun Yat-sen called it.
Yeah, it's just common knowledge at the time, right? That this stuff's going on.
So following that, he also said, my life is in your hands. If you let the matter be known outside, I shall be saved. If not, I shall certainly be executed. Is it good to save a life or to take it? Whether is it more important to regard your duty to God or to your master, to honor the just British or the corrupt Chinese government? So Sun Yat-sen really knew his audience here. This is a British servant.
Well, also, I'm sure he was a believer, but it's really smart for him to convert to Christianity because it really opens a lot of doors, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The speech worked, right? And God helped him, I guess. The British servant helped Sun Yat-sen to pass the letter to his friend, Mr. Kentley.
Okay.
In the following days, Mr. Kentley worked tirelessly because he was like, oh my God, this is where he is. You know what I mean? Like, because they were seeing each other every day.
I haven't seen him for a couple of days.
Yeah.
I wonder where he is.
I wonder if he went to the Chinese legation like we joked about. Yeah. So he worked the local police at Scotland Yard, the Foreign Office, the media. He worked everyone. You know?
Yeah.
He even went as far as finding a private detective to try to prove this. Through his effort, he really went to bat for his friend. On October 23rd, in the presence of Mr. Kentley, an inspector from Scotland Yard, and a messenger from the Foreign Office, Sun Yat-sen was handed over by Macartney. And at the same time, Macartney addressed the government officials. I hand this man over to you, and I do so on condition that neither the prerogative nor the diplomatic rights of the Chinese legation are interfered with. Like, I'm willingly handing him over to you. Not because I was forced to by your Foreign Office, because the Foreign Office went as far as threatening that if they don't give Sun Yat-sen back or release him, they're going to expel all the Chinese diplomats. Yeah. So I don't know how that works for a British citizen. I guess he's not going to be expelled. But that was a pretty heavy threat.
You're going to have to take your robes off and wear a suit again. So, I mean, because it does look bad if people using their embassies to kidnap people off the street, essentially.
Right. So Sun Yat-sen and his rescuers were sent out from the back door of the Chinese legation, to which he observed and later recounted the fact that the representatives of the British government were shown out by the back door. It was intended as a slight and insult. Yeah. And it was carried out as only one versed in the Chinese methods of dealing with foreigners can appreciate. Yeah. So, we're going to save face in front of our own people.
Yeah. You get this sense from quite a few accounts of the imperial period of like power is in ritual. So like the Qing court. Yeah. Like power is about these rituals of obedience and tribute and these things. Yeah. And it's like, well, so the colonial powers, I mean, power is a gunship, right? It's not, they don't care what door they get shown out of, right? As long as they're still in charge.
That's exactly what he said. You know, you read his mind.
Yeah.
Or rather, you read the Chinese mind.
Mm-hmm.
The English way of looking at things, the fact of my release was all that was cared for.
Yeah.
But to the Chinese, the manner of the release wiped out all the triumphs of British diplomacy in obtaining it. So that it's okay, they got back the top fugitive of our country as long as we have shown them out in the back door.
Yeah.
Both had their triumphs, the Chinese and the British, and no doubt it brought them equal gratification. But you know, lucky Sun Yat-Sen, he's free at last. After his release, Sun Yat-Sen, Mr. Cantley, Inspector Jarvis, and the messenger from the Foreign Office, don't have a name, don't know who he was, went into a cab, and on the way to Scotland Yard, Inspector Jarvis gravely lectured Sun Yat-Sen on his delinquencies and scolded him, I quote, as a bad boy, and advised him to have nothing to do anymore with revolutions. Well, boy, did Sun Yat-Sen listen. And
he's like, listen, buddy, this was a real waste of my afternoon.
Right. Yeah, no, the Scotland Yard wasn't so big on it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in the book, Sun Yat-Sen didn't even call it the police station, right? It was just Scotland Yard. And even if someone didn't read Sherlock Holmes, how would they know what that is? But I guess London is the center of the universe at the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's got a special name for its location.
I mean,
you know what it is.
It would be like just saying something was like Hogwarts today.
No, right? And it's like Tiananmen Square. It's like, of course you know what Tiananmen Square. You know, it's that level of recognition.
I mean, Sherlock Holmes was like the most popular thing ever at this point in time.
So, you know, Scotland Yard, I was like, oh, I've read that before. They got off the cab and a group of reporters surrounded them. They were eager for the story, and Sun Yat-Sen spoke until he could not speak no more. But he's free at last.
Yeah.
Soon after, he wrote this little book.
Gotta strike while the iron's hot.
Called Kidnapping London, and this really made him famous abroad in the English world.
Yeah.
So, and it's a very cute little book. It's like 60 pages, fun read. Because, you know, like he writes all these like big theories about where China's going. Yeah. And there's this little book of him detailing how he was trying to efficiently throw a paper ball out the window onto the street and wrap some coins into it. Yeah. And, but I really feel like it sort of presented him as this, you know, he had this presence with him that he wasn't.
A dignity.
Yeah. It has it had a lot of dignity within this writing. Mm-hmm. And self-awareness, I felt. So I would highly recommend it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get a Kindle book today.
It's probably you can probably get it for free. I mean, I think
it's been a long time.
It's over 100 years. I think it's out of copyright.
Yes. So Sun Yat-Sen wasn't, like we said, wasn't famous beforehand. The English servant didn't even know who he was. He had to basically brand himself as a
persecuted Christian.
Yeah, persecuted Christian abroad. But this had really helped him with his efforts of fundraising and all that. And he went on to do big things.
Well, so the interesting thing is, though, is it probably helps him also that, like, it was written in English. Yeah. Because I think there is obviously, I mean, even to this day, as recent events have shown, there can be an othering, right, of the Asian experience. And I think reading an account in somebody's own, first-person experience, own words in English, sort of makes them seem more like a human. Yeah. And more immediate. Yeah. And
he had a voice.
He had a voice, right?
Yeah.
That he could talk directly to people, which I think probably helped him become the revolutionary. Not to romanticize it too much, but there is a force that some people have. I don't have it, right? I don't know if you have it, Cherry, where if you get in a room with them, like they can just convince you, right?
Yeah. They can speak to a crowd and convince that crowd.
Convince the crowd, right? I mean, Mao had it. Chiang Kai-shek didn't have it. But Sun Yat-Sen definitely have it, right? I mean,
yeah, he probably has it the most, because I was thinking he would be very good at like being a modern day like elected president. Yes. He would get elected.
Well, he had to create the. He's like, I'd be a real good politician, but China doesn't have politics, so I'm gonna have to
create one.
I have to create a republic first, right?
And in his life, like he was sort of always a disadvantage because of his lack of like military experience and all that. But he makes it up. Because you need someone who has the dreams and who can make all these speeches to sort of bring people together.
Well, he found people who were good at the military stuff.
He found them, right?
Who he could trust.
He convinced him. He convinced them, right?
Yeah.
And so the other day I was watching, that 2004 Obama speech at the DNC.
Yeah. That was sort of his introduction.
That was his introduction, and that was a really good speech, even though he wasn't even the candidate, right? And I was watching it on YouTube, and someone was...
He's speaking, and it cuts to Hillary Clinton, and she looks pissed off.
Less of this infighting. Okay. But... No, but I was... Not that we're quoting YouTube now, but, so I was watching it on YouTube, and someone under it was saying, well, I'm Australian. Now, after the speech, I feel like I am an American. And I was thinking that's the sort of aura you got to have.
Yeah, Sun Yat-Sen, he wrote this book, and everybody's like, oh, wow, like, these Chinese people have it rough. I want to, help in this revolution.
Yes. And he did use this book. He didn't just talk about, here's how I got kidnapped. Mm-hmm. He first talked about how China was just such a, the Chinese court was such a terrible setup and terrible system. And the Chinese people, in his own words, was far from, stupid. And
so, I mean, probably the best thing that the Qing court could have done for Sun Yat-Sen was kidnap him unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
Right? Because without this, he probably never would have been famous. He would have just been slumming around in London for another...
Mr. McCartney might have been secretly helping him.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But, if they were willing to pay for that steamboat and just get him back in China on the second day, this wouldn't happen.
No.
They missed the window.
And then he went on through another, dozen revolutions?
Many revolutions, which I think we... need another episode to detail them.
Yeah.
But, there was the first Guangzhou uprising. There was the second Guangzhou there was a third Guangzou uprising.
I wonder if
and
Sun
many in
Yat-Sen
between.
has a record for most survived failed uprisings.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So.
But eventually he succeeded.
Eventually he did.
And with his good friend Ren Shikai, famous general of China.
Yeah.
Who definitely didn't stab him in the back. And,
no, and it's like 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, and it's like,
but
great.
I think so. I mean, I think we're going to talk about this in a future episode. But essentially, Sun Yat-Sen, eventually succeeded. Mm-hmm. They formed a republic, and then he had to essentially let Ren Shikai, who was the general with the army, be the first president. I think
he had to.
I think they elected him, and then he
was like, no,
he passed it over, gave it to Ren Shikai.
Yeah.
And then Ren Shikai declared himself emperor.
Yeah.
And but the thing was, though, I think the key thing that Sun Yat-Sen did, though, is that everybody essentially thought it was ridiculous that Ren Shikai was declaring himself emperor. Mm-hmm. So even though
at least we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, even though the empire had only been dead for like a few years, technically, it was dead forever, right? You couldn't go back after Sun Yat-Sen,
you can't revive
right? It just seems stupid.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why he's the father of the country, because he turned it from China, the imperial state, into a nation state.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wrote a cute little book about getting kidnapped in London.
Yeah. It's called Kidnapping London. Strongly recommend. Interesting read.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was him. Kidnapped in London.
I guess thank you for listening, everyone. And if you have any comments, leave them on our Twitter page. Twitter.
Or Apple Podcasts.
Or Apple Podcasts. Only if you liked it, though. And have a nice week.
See you next time.